Welcome to Together for Good, brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio. Together for Good exists to recognize and uplift the many people working together for the good of San Antonio and the surrounding communities. Now here's the host of Together for Good, Cody Knowlton.
Okay, thanks, Katie, and hello and welcome back to Together for Good. This show is being brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio as a part of our mission to honor our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and our Baptist heritage by encouraging and funding health-related programs at area nonprofits and churches. Through Together for Good, we connect our audience to the great work these organizations do in our community. Folks, we're going to do something a little different today on the show, and we're very excited about it. First, this interview will be released in 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2. So you'll want to be sure to tune in next week to hear the second half. Also, we're not going to talk about a specific nonprofit organization. Instead, we have a longtime friend of our foundation, and probably most nonprofits in our area know her, and that is Marion Lee. Marion is a 34-year veteran of the philanthropic community here in San Antonio. As co-founder of the consulting firm Lee Plus Associates, Marion and her team work to help nonprofits and philanthropists throughout Texas build strong communities. And today, we've asked Marion to come in and cover a topic that we actually talk about every week, but don't necessarily dig into. At the end of every episode, you all will recall here at Together for Good, we ask nonprofit leaders to tell us how the community can support them. Many of them will start by saying, well, of course, money is always good, but, and then emphasize different ways people can help, which is great. But today, we're going to talk a lot about the importance of investing in the nonprofits you love with your time, your support, and your money. So let's start off by getting to know Marion a little bit. First off, Marion, glad you're on the program. Welcome. We've been wanting to have you on for a long, long time, so we're glad you made time for us.
Well, good afternoon, Cody. And I can't tell you how exciting this is for me because we get to talk about the thing that we love the most, which is philanthropy.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Well, Marion, what is your background in the nonprofit field, and then what do you do now?
That's a funny question. So my background is varied. I never meant to be here. I guess that's the first answer. I got here by sheer accident. I started volunteering at a local museum, the Whitty. I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was varied. We did different things every day, and they would come and talk about problems in front of me. And I began to solve problems and go out and raise money and figure out different things. And I finally realized that this was actually a calling for me. And I moved on to the Institute of Texan Cultures. From there, it's so exciting, got to work on the Central Library, the big campaign for that big orange building, and I adore it still to this day. And oddly, someone called and said, why don't you get on the other side and see what it's like to give money away? So I had an opportunity to work for the San Antonio Area Foundation. I was actually there for about 5.5 years. Quite a bit of it was as CEO. And so I did have the unique and really gratifying opportunity to understand what it was like to be in charge of philanthropy for people both here with us and who have passed. And a wonderful, wonderful man by the name of Michael Bacon called me one day and said, let's go back and help the people that really need us. And thus, the company was born June of 2000. And 24 years later, here we are. We work in South Texas predominantly, but all over Texas and oddly North Carolina. And we do everything from governance and education to fundraising, strategic planning, and recruitment. Mm-hmm. And I still love what I do every day. Mm.
You touched a little bit on the fact this is a calling for you. After 34 years, have you really identified kind of your why, why you got into this? You touched a little bit on it at the beginning that it just kind of happened, but...
we're lucky when we find something that feeds our soul. Back in the day when I started in nonprofits, it didn't pay enough to survive on. And so it had to be a calling. You had to be doing something you truly loved. I was lucky. History, art, philanthropy, all sorts of different things. I've always been kind of a curious person, interested in almost everything that happens. And so, when you go home and you eat beans and toast, and because you're not being paid a great deal of money, but every day you feel good, that you fulfill something for somebody. And that truly is it. In fact, for the last 4+ years of my life, I carry around a poem that talks about just being able to make somebody's life better. And that's, yes, it's a calling. I think everyone in this business, and frankly, if it's not a calling, I don't think you should be in this business.
How important is public support of nonprofits? I mean, we know that our taxes pay for a lot of things, government programs, things like that. But, how is supporting nonprofits so important?
Are we talking about individual donors? Just the general? So public to me means government support. When you talk about, so the simple answer is everybody deserves an opportunity to feel good about themselves. And as we all know in fundraising, you'll know the moment that a donor makes a gift that really speaks to them, appeals to their heart. And it's not about the money. It's about the fact that they feel fulfilled. So I think it's important on a number of different levels. One, I think there's always a need. I think individuals should participate in philanthropy and making donations because I frankly think it's good for them to learn to give something to somebody, whether it's volunteerism or money. But it is of public benefit to all of us.
Mm-hmm. Why is it that so many small nonprofits, Marion, struggle when the big nonprofits are successful and they seem like they just keep growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger? And we won't name any names, but, it does seem like it is kind of the survival of the fittest in a lot of cases. So what are your thoughts there?
Cody, it's not big versus small. It's yes, we have very large nonprofits, and frankly, a lot of them aren't run very well. I wish I could tell you if you're a $12 million organization, you're just doing a bang-up job, but that's not really true. Small organizations frequently have some of the most engaged, impassioned, detail-oriented, and talented boards that truly, truly care. It is a calling for them. It's a mission for them. And they take this very personally, and they take very good care of their nonprofits. So in all the years, particularly in consulting and, frankly, in philanthropy, size has nothing to do with it.
Sometimes the optics aren't what they appear.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the nitty-gritty then of donating money to nonprofits. I mean, nonprofits don't always like to talk about it, but without financial support from individuals, they can't stay open. So how important is individual giving to nonprofit organizations?
I think it's critically important. If we go back, and if anybody hears this and I've got it wrong, I believe 68 or 69% of all the funding in 2022 came from individuals. That's living individuals, and 9% came from individuals in their wills. So essentially what that tells us is the majority of charitable giving in the United States still comes from all of us. And that, by the way, is not Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. That's all of us. So I think it's critically important to a nonprofit. Moreover, you build a relationship with a group of people who want to share your mission. I mean, what you call this program, Together for Good. We're all in this together for good, to do good, and to help other people. So you're giving people a wonderful opportunity. You're giving them a chance to express themselves. You're teaching philanthropy generationally to individuals. And at the end of the day, when you need help, I don't care what kind of help it is as a nonprofit, an individual can react faster than any institutional donor out there.
Is it fair to say that the perception is, though, that it is the corporations and the foundations that are giving the majority of the funds, not individuals?
Oh, you're leading me down a path. I think particularly since COVID, unfortunately, we have developed an attitude within, let's say, fundraising staff that they would rather not have a relationship. That's the plethora of let's text, let's email, pick up the phone. Oh, my goodness. People don't even want to talk to another individual. And yet, how can a text message is not a relationship. An email is not a relationship. You have actually got to meet people and get to know them. And again, let me just say that. The moment you see the donor respond, it's their face, it's their body language. You suddenly know that you have talked to them about something that means a great deal to them, and that's the path you should follow. Mm-hmm. So it's very important to have a personal relationship.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Let's talk a little bit about the tools that nonprofits offer for financial giving. I mean, there's monthly pledges, there's galas, and all kinds of fun things that you can do. Can you drill down a little bit on the various tools that nonprofits use?
And it's fun. The point is to stay creative. It depends upon the age group of the donor, but they all want it to be easy, because if you have to make it hard for them, they don't want to do that. So everything from Facebook challenges and matches to QR codes to donate buttons that should be, by the way, really prominent and easy. And if they have to go through more than 3 clicks to get where they are, you've probably already worn something out. And by the way, the older the donor, the more competent and capable they are of this. Don't ever think that they are not. But I think it's really important to think about people on different levels and appeal to them and what appeals to their giving. I don't want to say older donors, but people don't like giving large amounts of money through email and text messages. So that's probably going to have to be a situation where you sit down and talk to somebody. I mean, depending upon how many zeros we're talking about here. But I think you start out with gifts of $25, $50, $100, which are easy to get off of the web and off of your website and everything else. But if you want to start escalating those gifts, you're going to have to get in deeper. You're going to have to get to know people. You might have to like them. And they might even get to like you.
Is mail still used like it once was?
Not like it
but
used
it is
to.
Still being used.
It is still being used.
Okay.
I think it can be effective. Don't get me started on should we write a thank you note or should we send a text message? Because I'm going to fall on the thank you note every time. Mm-hmm. But yes, mail is still being used, and I think that there's still a space for that with save the date cards and different kind of annual appeals. I do like annual appeals, particularly when you're trying to get your donor from $250 up to $500, $750, or $1,000. I think a mail appeal can be effective.
And I think in a lot of cases, if I get mail, I may not respond with a check in the mail, but I'll keep it and go, I'm going to go on their website and make a gift. But it was the mail that helped me get to the website.
Absolutely. But one of the things that isn't happening is we're not checking whether people have passed away. We're not spelling people's names correctly. We're not addressing them correctly because that requires effort. But I hope that we all understand, too, that the more effort you put into something, usually the better the return.
Yeah. Listeners, if you're just now joining us, this is Together for Good, brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio. I'm your host, Cody Knowlton, and today my guest is a good friend, Marion Lee. Marion is a consultant who works with nonprofits and philanthropists. And today she's telling us more about how we as a community can contribute to nonprofit work. And this is the first episode of a 2-part series, so we hope you'll stay tuned to the second part. So, Marion, let's keep our conversation going. This has been just extremely enlightening for me and exhilarating. I love talking about this. What are some of the philosophies or rationales behind giving or not giving to nonprofits? I mean, why is it that some people give and others do not?
Oh, Cody, come on. Most people don't give because you don't ask them to, or you haven't paid attention enough to know what they care about. I mean, everybody thinks this is some sort of big mystery out there. Yes, are there people who are not philanthropic? Absolutely, they're not philanthropic. But there are also people out there who have been approached in the most, I call it negative ways. There's no person getting to know people, and therefore they're going to invest about the same amount of time into this as you are. So, yes, there are actually, I'll be honest, 34 years I've been in this business total. I have run into only one individual in 34 years who was just Scrooge. Let's say it. Just Scrooge, didn't care, doesn't care about the world as a whole, and you can't even find, whether it's environment, animals, children, whatever, they don't care. Most people have something they care deeply about, but you're going to have to pay attention to figure it out, or you'll get a cursory gift.
And then you need to ask.
Sure. Mm-hmm. There is nothing wrong with saying, what do you love? What makes your heart sing? What do you do? I think I told you once about the fact that we had a scholarship program, and I never realized how effective it was until I looked into the audience from the back, and I saw how many parents, husband and wife, when their scholar would walk across the stage, reached over and grabbed each other's hands because they were reliving the child they lost that they named that scholarship after. That had a profound effect on me because I realized that I could pitch anything in the world at them. But the fact is, what was really going to appeal to them was scholarships and people who give to the environment, animals. Good grief, such a passionate group of people. They truly, truly care. And then let's get into the ones that people don't talk about. Domestic violence, sexual assault. Those are the things that surfaced during COVID that we still haven't quite wanting to deal with. We chose unsheltered. I think the tide is going to turn here and that we will be paying more attention to those things because we have to accept that this happens and that people need help.
Marion, some people tend to become more generous near the end of their lives. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I could also turn around and say to you that sometimes they become a little bit more parsimonious towards the end of their lives because they are fearful that they won't have enough money to be comfortable as they grow older. But I think you find an older generation having taken care of themselves, having achieved most of what they want, having taken care of their children, particularly actually currently. We are seeing more and more donors who have said, I've done it all, I've had it all, I've taken care of my children during their lifetime. I'm not going to leave my estate to these children. I am going to turn and give my estate to people or organizations that really need it to help whatever it is. And so you're seeing, particularly the baby boomers, of which I'm a tail-end baby boomer, you're seeing an uptick in philanthropy. Also, let me just say, 25 years ago, we started sounding the horn that we were not working with women enough to talk to them about philanthropy because women are going to be the ones left here, more than likely, from a generational perspective, with the money. And we needed to educate and empower and let them know that it is theirs and they can give it away, even if they weren't the primary person earning the money. And so I think you're beginning to see that come to fruition. Older women are beginning to give more philanthropically.
Interesting. Let's look at some long-term giving options. Planned giving, which is an industry term that is becoming more mainstream, if you will, is a great way to leave a lasting legacy. And I love to talk to people about that. So let's talk about estate planning for a minute. How much money does someone need to have to think about leaving some of it to a nonprofit? I mean, is this kind of a millionaire thing? Or at least is that the perception that, well, you got to be a really, really rich person to even have a planned giving conversation with somebody?
About 5 years ago, our office, all of us, were talking about planned giving. And I was a little bit shocked that some of our folks didn't have wills. They had grown children, no wills. They just didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to accept it. And these are people from a variety of backgrounds, not necessarily wealthy people. I think it's not necessarily money. It's what do you have that's precious. We talked about this a little bit earlier. What is precious? And it could be anything from household items. The smallest estate I ever, for some reason I always end up being the executrix on something, but the smallest estate I ever settled was $19,000 and the largest in the multi-millions. And I don't think there's anything too small. And particularly if you're planning on giving it to charity, it's precious. The charity is going to accept that as being precious, and they're going to do with whatever it is that you leave them that's in the best interest for whoever they are serving. So I don't think we should look at it like that. I think we need to look at it as we have this capacity. It costs almost nothing to write a will. There's so many different ways to leave money. Insurance, your retirement. Some of the best philanthropists I've ever known were retired school teachers. That is an awesome, fearsome, amazingly phenomenal group of people who put money away and then give it away charitably and are not given enough applause. Good
encouragement for everybody to have a will, because at the end, we're all going to be philanthropists. It's just, are you a philanthropist to the United States government or are you a philanthropist to causes that you care about and people you care about?
And I think there's a forgotten group. Single women in their 40s are a hugely forgotten group of people by their universities, by a lot of different people. They are not perceived as being I think there was a time, as being a group of people that would have philanthropy, and yet married now, but at one time for about 15 years, I was exactly that. A woman in her 40s who had amassed a certain amount of precious things, and I was really surprised at the lack of people who would ever contact me to ask me for funding.
Interesting. If our listeners have ever visited museums, zoos, college campuses, public parks, they've probably noticed names on things, from individual bricks to entire buildings. Why is that? Talk about naming on things.
It started a very long time ago, before any of us were in this room. It was the thing you did. Rockefeller, Carnegie, everyone made large gifts, and it was considered a gracious courtesy to put their name on it. And as time has evolved, that has begun to wane a little bit. I'm not saying naming opportunities are not still popular. They are. They really are. But you're finding, I think in all the studies recently, that donors are less likely to have a door, a wall with their name on it than they used to be. And so I love that, because instead of the prerequisite brass plaque on there, you're seeing more creative ways. And also the advent of timing out. Universities started it. We're going to name it for 10 years, 20 years, and then we have the right to rename it after somebody else. And then we've had a few moments, Enron being one of them, when you have lots of different things named after an organization or an individual who behaved poorly, and then there's regret. And, oh, goodness, what do we do with it? And a scramble to rename it something else. So actually, I think the naming opportunity has become less interesting. I think donors like recognition, but I don't know that they need that permanent, my name is scrawled on the wall.
That leads us perfectly into the next topic I wanted to talk about, and that's donor advised funds, where you can make a gift anonymously and not have your name on anything.
Absolutely.
So tell us about donor advised funds. I think they're becoming more and more known out there in the general public.
I love donor advised funds. Honestly, that was how I cut my teeth on philanthropy. I suddenly had 181 donor advised funds. Some people were with us, some not. Most of whom had a very specific purpose, that they wanted their funds, and they were trusting us to carry through. Long after they were gone, they were trusting us. And I love donor advised funds. It provides you with anonymity if you want it. And so you see some creative names, the Jaguar Fund or something like that. And that's usually something that's meaningful to the family. And that's fun to do that, but it also gives them an amount of anonymous discretion. Let me put it like that. People are not applying, crowding them into a corner in the grocery store. That used to happen to me all the time, and asking them whether they'll fund something. So I think, personally, back in the late 1990s, we were afraid of the growth of donor-advised funds through other organizations. Fidelity at that time was the big threat to community foundations. And the big difference, I'll tell you, is I think that there's a degree of care, donor care, that an organization, let's say Baptist, ever had advised funds. You know your community. You know what's going on. You're able to serve your donor well because you're able to advise them and care for them. Whereas I think some of the big national groups don't have the insider knowledge that you would have or a community foundation would have. Okay,
so tell our audience kind of in a short way what a donor advised fund is. How does it work?
Also known as a DAF.
A DAF, yep, DAF.
It's a fund that is created either within a community foundation or within a large group such as Fidelity that they usually have some restrictions. I think $10,000 is the minimum to open it. It's usually named in some way. There should be either a broad charitable purpose or a very specific purpose. And at least what I know, the donor has the right to advise the group that is holding the funds on how they would like the funds used. And it's usually in a written communication. And the monies then go out to the nonprofit. And so the donor gets a tax deduction when they initiate the fund. Yes. And then they can give the money out
over years. I mean, there's no hurry to give those out.
Look at the numbers. The growth of donors-advised funds in the United States is overwhelming. People are not necessarily opening private foundations anymore. It's time-consuming and can be costly. They are opening DAFs within a variety of different groups and sometimes several different DAFs because, frankly, it's fairly inexpensive. It's low stress. You have anonymity if you care for it. And you get your tax deduction the moment the money crosses the line into the DAF.
Marion, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and we're looking forward to another episode. So, folks, remember you can catch our episodes anywhere you get your podcast or by visiting Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio's website, bhfsa.org/Together for Good. We'll be back next week with the second part of this great conversation we're having with Marion Lee. Be sure to listen because I know there's going to be even more great discussion that we're going to get into. Until next week, God bless and take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in today for Together for Good. We hope you've been encouraged, uplifted, and inspired. Until our next time together, may the Lord bless and keep you. And in all things, to God be the glory.